Hi, I'm Kara Pogreba. Welcome to Bright Hope Creations. Today we're going under the sea with SugarPea Designs, and we're going to do some no-line coloring focused on this little pearl, and that was from Mermaid Kisses, and this is the Spirograph Mandala. And we're going to start with some milled lavender and a blending brush, and I'm just going to get the center of my focal point there. And you can see I taped it down, and now I'm using some Wilted Violet going around. First I go around kind of gently, and then once I feel like I've got it blending well, then I can kind of go in there and make sure I get in all those little edges. Come back in with the milled lavender and blend those together. And then this is Salty Ocean. And I won't show you all the blending just because, well, it gets a little long. But also, this is a longer video because I have some no-line coloring in it. So if you're not that interested in no-line coloring, you can either skip around a little bit, or there is a setting. If you go to the settings, you can double the speed. So I don't know if many people are probably already aware of that, but I take no offense if you want to double speed this up. But all right, I put a little water, spritz a little water on there, and now I'm wiping that up. This is an underwater area, so I thought it'd be nice to have some droplets on there. And I was first going to no-line color this little oyster, but I changed that up later, and I really want to focus more on this mermaid. So I am stamping this out in antique linen distress ink, and it's full on. I'm not trying to make it real light. And I'll start in with her skin, and I'm just finding where I want those shadows, mapping those out with my lightest. And so, if her hair is going to bring in some shading, and where her neck is a little bit further back than her face, and that's an ear right there. So you can just see I'm trying to figure out where these shadows are going to go. And I do that with my lightest color before I go in with my darkest, especially if I've got a new image and I've never colored this little girl before. So she's I've got to test things out first. But I came in with the E02 and blending it out with the E00, and now the E000. And I'll blend that all the way through her skin, but I will also come back later to put in some more shadows once I have everything else colored in, to see how it fits in with her hair and her tail. So starting on this tail here, I'm just getting color on the tail so that it's easier to blend around her hand. And then now I'm coming in with the V04, and careful around that hand again, because I really want to keep definition there. I don't want to kind of lose it into a mitten kind of blob of a hand. So just taking my time. And that's why these get a little long, no-line coloring ones for me, because I just want to take my time and be patient with it so that I'm keeping in the details. When I was a little girl, my mom used to say my theme song was from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and it was a song called I Like to Take My Time. So I guess I am one of those people. I talk a little slow, I color a little slow, but it's all good. We all are different that way. And as Fred Rogers would say, we are all special. So now we're going on, and I put in some VO5 and coming down with the VO4, giving a little texture to her tail now, kind of like scales. And it's just little dots, and at the top it's a little more of a scallop shape, and as I get down lower, those scales I'm saying are a little bit smaller, so they're just little dots, and I even get right at the tip of my marker so that I can get down to the end and just have tiny dots. But now I'm coming in with the VO1 because those dots, I don't want them to look like measles. I want them to look like part of her tail, so I blend them in, and then they look more like they're part of her tail instead of on top of her tail. And now coming down into the bottom fin portions, I want to kind of I'm coloring right on the lines because, as you might remember, this was antique linen, and I'm not looking for her to have a light beige tail, so I just colored right on top of it, and now I'm coming in with my B00 and blending that up into the violet, and then coming in with the VO1 to blend that out. And I'll go back and forth a little bit with this because I'm trying to figure out how much I want to give her blue versus violet. So this is a bit darker now, just taking shape, finding the shadows of that part of her tail, and then blending that in with the B00. And these colors are kind of matching the colors that I use to ink blend the stencil on the main panel of the card. And you can see over on that main panel where I colored in the oyster and the pearl, I will be cutting out another oyster instead of using the one that's on the card, kind of to pop it out, and she's going to be popped up, so the oyster's going to be popped up, and they'll both be more of a focal point that way, I decided. So here I am coming in with this B02 and coming up her tail a little bit more and blending down off the shadows there and giving it a little bit of texture of fin-like look and where it connects to the main part of her tail. Okay, and I'm not really sure of the anatomy of a mermaid, but the top part of her tail where it kind of folds over there for her, she's gonna have blue, and just finding those and coloring it in. That's one thing with no line coloring is I like to kind of figure out where everything is, so I'm not coloring part of her hair when I think it's part of the tail, and just defining the areas. And then I can come in with a darker shade, this one B02, and then blending it back in with the B00. And there we go. Now with a little texture coming from the blue color as well, where I brought that blue up from the fins into her tail and decided I could get this a little more defined here, so that's what I'm working on. And I'm using the VO1 for that because it gives a little different shade, kind of blends in better with the tail. And here I come in to shade the belly a little bit more. I'm using an E21, and I like that for a nice contrast between the arm and her stomach there. And now onto this little comb in her hair. It's tiny, so I'm getting those lines on with my color, so right over the stamped image. Again, it's not going to be that tan color, so I'm kind of drawing with my marker right on that image and then coming in with a lighter one and filling it in. And this is really so small that I'm not going to do a lot of blending or anything. I want to keep it kind of enhanced that way. So onto her shells, and I decided these are going to be a combination of the violet and the blue, and I don't show it, but I'm looking over at the packaging for her the stamps and kind of see where that is so that I'm not missing or making your shells different than they should be as they are illustrated. So that does help when doing no line coloring, is to have the image stamped or to look at the packaging on the side. All right, I brought it close up so you could see this a little better. This is a small area, so I wanted to be showing you exactly how I use the marker in a small area. Sometimes you really are just touching the paper with dots or tiny little flicks to blend things out. And I'll put the blue on top of the purple and the purple on top of the blue. I'm not trying to keep them separate. I'm kind of making sure that they look like they're blending one to the other. And I use Georgia Pacific. It's 110 pound cardstock, and it's not very thick. When you hear 110 pound, you're usually thinking of a thicker paper like the Nina Solar White, but this is not that. I don't use it for a card base, but it works really well for me for coloring. I feel like I have control over it. It doesn't soak up the ink too much, and I just have more control over the coloring. Now, I know a lot of people don't care for this cardstock, but for me it works. I think this is because I started with it, and so it's always it's what I was used to from the beginning. All right, now we're on to her hair, and she's going to have blonde hair. So again, I'm looking for where I'm going to have the deepest shadows, and I like to map those out first with a lighter color so that I am prepared to start with the darker ones. Oh, and if you are in the US, you can get that Georgia Pacific cardstock at Walmart. So that's a plus. All right, so this is an E21, and when I do blonde hair, I like to use it as shadow for the yellow colors. Kind of makes it more like a blonde than just yellow hair. So I'm coming in with the E21, and I'll even come in with an E23 into the darkest areas. But trying to make sure that I've got some definition between her skin and the hair. And here's that E23 coming in. And I'm just going to do very small lines, almost not quite, but a little bit like I'm outlining the area so that it's giving real definition between that skin color and the light hair color. And I probably could even get darker with her hair, but not today. So another reason I wanted blonde hair on her was it's a contrast with the blue and purple. Kind of have something different. Otherwise, as you saw with that background and the oyster, everything was kind of looking like one. And it was so blended that nothing was really standing out. So this color contrast really helps to give her, you can see her a little bit more with that. And I even do that with the oyster. I have the oyster all colored up with the blues and purples, and then I come in with this, with the Y21, the yellow, And it just made all the difference. It kind of brightened it up and just gave it something different than the background so that it would show up better. So I'm gonna keep working on getting these shadows blended out. So really trying to get that E23 blended out with the E21 so you don't see those little lines, but that it looks more like it's just the shadow deep in those different parts of her hair. Now her hair, you can see it's in like chunks, locks of hair rather than one strand of hair. You don't see every strand of hair, you see locks of hair. And I like that look because that's what you see when you're looking across from somebody. You see parts of her hair instead of every little strand. And so I'm trying to give those that definition, and the illustrator did this on the stamp, so you can see with the stamped lines how they separated her hair, and I'm trying to follow that. Just filling everything in now with my lightest color, the Y21, and now that they have shadows all around, you can see the various chunks or locks in her hair. So I will come in and give some texture and a few wispy little hair strands that you'll see, but for the most part we're looking at it as a whole instead of the little strands. Now this is the Y23 that I've been coloring with, and shading the next up from the Y21, which was my lightest color. And I go back and forth between the Ys and the E20s at 21 and 23, both of them. And then the combination of the two kind of gives it that blonde hair look, in my opinion. So back with the E21 now, and here I am giving a few little wispy details, especially in the highlight areas, the lighter areas. And it helps to turn the paper around. For me, if I'm doing these little flicks towards me, I have more control than when I'm doing them away or sideways. So it helps to turn that paper where I need it to go in order to get that. Now here's as dark as I go. This is the Y26. Just enhancing those shadows. And, you can play with the stuff for a long time before you decide, okay, that's good. So it's really up to you where you want to stop. I mean, it's one of those things that you can come back later and look at it and say, oh, no, I'd like this to be a little darker, or I really can't see that definition between her shoulder and the back of her hair, or so it's like that. But then there's times where you just say, okay, it's a card. My friend will love it, and I am done. So it's really just a matter of how much you want to play with it, or if you're practicing and you want to really get into practice. Now you can see right here, I felt like, oh, this is looking a little funny, so I made it go down, lay down better. Her hair seemed to have a little bump on the bottom, so I smoothed that out, and then I brought in those little lines, and now blending a little bit more in with that Y21, the lightest color. So anything that I put a little texture, I'm just pulling that out more with that Y21. All right, now to give her a little bit more definition or detail in her hand. I want to make sure that you see those shadows so that it looks like a hand. And on her ear, the ear would have an opening in it, and then pulling from her hair with the E21 where it would be more of a shadow. So with the skin, I like to start with the skin color because it's so light and you don't want to pull a lot of other colors into it. If you accidentally catch, let's say you had red next to it, you don't want to pull that into your skin. So I do it first, but then I will come back at the end to get any kind of details of those shadows. And then here I'm just using a Copic multiliner to add in her facial details that were on the stamp. And I'll cut that out using my Big Shot. And I'm stamping the sentiment. And I love the sentiment because it's very meaningful that even the smallest grain of sand can do great things. And there you see the pearl. And here's where I come in with that Y21 to give the brightness to that oyster that was kind of missing. So I have a top folding card, and I'm just going to adhere this panel that was cut out with the scallop rectangle from the Card Front Element Builder. And then I'm going to adhere that strip with the sentiment, and I have the oyster on some foam adhesive so it stands out, and my little mermaid, and she is, I'll wiggle her around a little bit until I decide where she looks best, and then she'll be adhered down. I'll clip off the edges of the sentiment strip, and the card is all done. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video today, and if you did, if you would like it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and may the Lord bless you today. Bye.